Hello, this is MAN 558, Organizational Psychology. Today we are going to talk about leadership and the role behaviors of the leaders. Let's start with leadership. From the time immemorial, whenever human beings have come together in pursuit of some goals or objectives, they have felt the need of a leader. Leadership has been defined in many ways by different scholars. One of the most recent and comprehensive definitions is the ability of an individual to influence, motivate, and enable others to contribute toward the effectiveness and success of the organizations of which they are members. Leadership is essentially an influence process. Effective leaders are those who have a profound influence on the followers. Some of the early studies explored leadership as a cluster of stable personality traits of individual leaders. Such studies looked at leaders in isolation from their context and therefore did not take into account the factors involved in leader-follower and leader-context interaction, which might enhance our understanding of leader behaviors. One set of studies focused on the leader's decision-making role in group contexts. The basic question these studies addressed was, which decision-making behavior or style, autocratic or participative, enables the leader to be more effective in group? The other set of studies sought to identify two other leadership role behaviors that are necessary to attain the group's objectives. First one is task roles with a focus on problem identification and solution, including resources, allocation, and monitoring of the behavior of organizational members that is necessary to accomplish the task at hand. And the second one is social roles with a focus on people orientation, including interpersonal relationships, which are conducive to building group cohesion and developing the quality of working life of its members. Leadership role behaviors are important for understanding leadership. These are decision-making role, the task role behaviors, the social role behaviors, the self-oriented role behaviors, and the charismatic role. First, decision-making role. Effectiveness of leaders' participative decision-making role behaviors is contingent upon subordinate and supervisory characteristics. Despite the enormous potential of participative leadership for employee satisfaction and organizational effectiveness, research suggests that the expected benefits have not always been realized. The reasons for the failure of participative leadership are partly due to a failure to recognize contingency factors such as the characteristics of the subordinates and the nature of superior-subordinate relations. The desirability of participative leadership depends upon the subordinate's motivation or need for participation in the decision-making process. Individuals have a need to control and cope with life events and feel empowered when they believe that they can cope with events, situations, and people they confront, but feel powerless when they believe that they cannot cope with them. This belief of individual is referred to as a belief in self-determination or a belief in personal self-efficiency, which has direct implications for participative leadership. When the subordinate's belief in self-determination or personal self-efficiency is high, participative leadership will be effective. However, when the subordinate's self-determination or self-efficiency belief is low, the effectiveness of participative leadership is only assured if it is accompanied by other empowering supervision practices such as supervisory actions to remove organizational obstacles to good performance, gradual increments in subordinate task complexity and responsibility accompanied by appropriate training and development, setting high performance expectations for subordinates and at the same time expressing confidence in their ability to meet these expectations. Effectiveness of the leader's participative decision-making role behaviors is contingent upon task or problem characteristics. In addition to the employee's motivational state and the supervisory practices, the characteristics of the decision problem or situation are equally important considerations influencing the manager's choice of participative leadership role. Participative leadership becomes critical when subordinates' commitments is high, the leader does not have sufficient information, the problem is not well structured, subordinates' commitment probability is low if they are not involved in the decision, goal congruence is high, conflict about subordinates is likely, the subordinates as a group have sufficient information for a high-quality decision. An autocratic approach is more appropriate when the quality requirement is high, subordinates' commitment is low, and the leader's information is also high. Task and social roles. The task role behaviors. The performance by the leader of one or more of the role behaviors described below enables the group accomplish its task. This implies that if the needed role behaviors are not performed, the group's effectiveness is impaired. These role behaviors are idea initiators, that leaders performing this role behavior offer or propose ideas of how the task is to be done. These ideas could include new approaches, procedures, or structures to solve the problems which confront the group. Leaders should be information seeker, information provider, problem clarifier, summarizer, and consensus tester. The social role behaviors. The social role behaviors are also known as the maintenance role behaviors because they help to develop good relationships among members and the congenial climate which facilitates their working together as a group and not as the separate individuals and achieve the group task. When these role behaviors are not performed, the group risks losing the full participation of its members and as a consequence, the benefits of their knowledge, expertise, and experience. So, the leaders should be harmonizer, gatekeeper, supporter, compromiser, and standards monitor. The self-oriented role behaviors. These are role behaviors that might meet the leader's needs and goals but which are totally irrelevant to the group's task and often are obstacles to the effective functioning of the group. These are aggressor, blocker, recognition seeker, dominator, and avoider. It's the important thing, I think, charismatic role, the leadership roles of managers in decision-making, task accomplishment, and group maintenance are primarily directed toward achieving short-term operational objectives. This is done by using control strategies to ensure order and consistency in standard job behaviors of subordinates in day-to-day operations of the organization. However, organizations need more than this in their leaders. Organizations need leaders who can formulate long-term objectives for the organization that are novel and different from the status quo. That way, organizations can change and develop in competitive business environments. The model proposed by Conger and Kanungo suggests that the charismatic role provides such leadership. In the charismatic role, the leader moves organizational members from an existing present state towards some future state. This process can be conceptualized into three specific states, and the behavioral components identified in each of those strategy states can enable us to distinguish the charismatic from non-charismatic leadership. Stage 1. Evaluation of status quo. Leaders of organizations have to be highly sensitive to both the social and physical environment in which they operate. It is important that leaders are able to make realistic assessments of environmental constraints and resources needed to bring about change they advocate. In this assessment stage, what distinguishes charismatic from non-charismatic leaders is their ability to recognize deficiencies in the present system. In other words, they actively search out existing or potential shortcomings in the status quo. Because of their emphasis on deficiencies in the system and their high levels of intolerance for them, charismatic leaders are always seen as organizational reformers or entrepreneurs. In other words, they act as an agents of innovative and radical change. Stage 2. Formulation of organizational goals. After assessing the environment, a leader will formulate goals to achieve the organization's objectives. Charismatic leaders, however, can be distinguished from others by the nature of their goals and by the manner in which they articulate them. In their charismatic roles, leaders not only need to have visions and plans for achieving them, must also be able to articulate their visions and strategies for action in effective ways so as to influence their followers. And stage 3, achieving the vision. Charismatic leaders build in followers a sense of trust in their abilities and clearly demonstrate the tactics and behaviors required to achieve the organization's goals. The charismatic leader does this by building trust through personal example and risk-taking and through unconventional methods of behaviors. Charismatic leaders must appear knowledgeable experts in their area of influence. Finally, we can say that leaders are perceived as charismatic when they demonstrate expertise in transcending the existing order through the use of unconventional or countercultural means. And again, here we have key terms about this topic. First, of course, leadership, the process through which an individual influences and motivates others to follow them towards achieving the organizational goals. Participative decision-making, a process through which leaders encourage and solicit some level of participation of followers in the decision concerning themselves or the organization. Empowering leadership, leadership that facilitates growth and development of followers by removing barriers to the development and increasing follower self-efficiency. Task role behavior of leadership, focus on problem identification and solutions, including resources allocation and monitoring of the behavior of organizational members to accomplish the team and organizational goals. Social role behavior of leadership, focus on people orientation, including the interpersonal relationships, which are conducive to building group cohesion and developing the quality of work life of its members. And charismatic role behavior of leadership, focus on long-term objectives of the organization and formulating goals that are novel and different from the status quo. Thank you.